Get out! You're finished here. The words landed across the mansion library like a slap, and 43 guests in evening wear turned toward the woman beside the reading table as if someone had rung a bell. Only they could hear. She did not flinch. She did not lower the ledger in her hand. She simply looked at the man who had spoken, Dante Moretti, the most feared name on the northern coast, and set the book down with the same careful precision she used for everything else. "Of course, Mr. Moretti," she said. "Would you like me to finish cataloging the Florentine correspondence before I leave, or shall I stop mid-shelf?" The woman in the corner choked on her champagne. Dante did not answer. He was staring at her the way a man stares at a lock that has just clicked open in the wrong direction. Her name was Elena Voss. She was 31, plus size, brown-haired, and she had spent the last 2 years quietly rebuilding the private library of a criminal empire without anyone in the family bothering to learn how she spelled it. She was, until roughly 40 seconds ago, the head archivist of the Moretti estate. Then a rival's daughter had whispered something in Dante's ear about a missing letter, and Dante, who prided himself on decisions made in under 3 seconds, had chosen to believe her in public. He watched now as Elena removed her linen gloves, folded them, and placed them beside the ledger. She did not defend herself. She did not cry. She curtsied. Actually curtsied, dry as chalk, and walked toward the double doors, with the unhurried pace of a woman who had never once in her entire life run from anything. Halfway across the marble, she stopped, turned. "The Florentine letters are in acid-free sleeves on the third shelf. If you throw them away, please throw them away in the correct order." Then she was gone. Silence swallowed the room. Dante Moretti stood in the middle of 40 terrified guests holding a champagne glass. He did not remember accepting, and for the first time in 9 years, he could not remember what he had just been so certain about. His consigliere, Raffaele, quietly closed his eyes. "You've made a mistake," he murmured. Dante did not respond. He was still watching the door she had walked through. Somewhere in his chest, a very small, unfamiliar sensation had begun, the exact feeling of a man who has just thrown away something without checking whether it belonged to him. 3 days later, he would begin watching her every day. 6 days later, he would begin inventing reasons. 11 days later, he would understand with the awful clarity that arrives only when it is too late, that Elena Voss had not needed his library at all. His library had needed her, but that came later. On the night of the firing, he only knew 2 things. She had not begged, and the doors, when they closed behind her, had made no sound. What he did not yet know was how quickly a house built on his certainty could unravel when the one person who understood it walked away, and whether, when he finally chased her, she would even look up. By 10 the next morning, the Moretti estate had discovered something it did not know: how to survive. Nobody could find anything. Raffaele stood watching Dante turn over a ledger, looking for a page reference that did not exist, because the entire indexing system had been in Elena's head. A messenger came in with a sealed envelope from Milan, and stood there for 9 minutes because no one could remember which drawer received Milanese correspondence. The head of household staff, a formidable woman named Signora Costa, folded her arms in the doorway and watched Dante pace with the expression of someone who had lived through 3 wars and was very tired of watching men make identical mistakes. "The archive," Dante said finally, "cannot be this complicated. It's a room full of books. She organized them. How complicated could her system be?" Raphael, who had learned in his 14th year of service to answer questions Dante did not technically ask, said, "The system has 42,000 documents in it." Dante looked up. "In this house." Dante set the ledger down. Get someone new. Raphael had spent the entire morning attempting exactly that. He had called 3 agencies and 2 universities. 2 of the agencies had laughed. The third had, after learning who the previous archivist was, said very politely that they were not certain anyone alive could replace her within the year, and would Signor Moretti perhaps consider a formal apology. An apology, Dante repeated. For what? For firing her at a dinner party. Dante's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Raffaele saw it. That, more than anything else that morning, told him the situation was already worse than his employer understood. By noon, an assistant named Marco had been dispatched to catalog the third shelf of the North Gallery. He returned 2 hours later, pale and shaken, and reported that he could not tell which century he was in. By 3, a professor from the university had come to consult, taken one look at the reading room, whispered a small prayer in Latin, and left. By 5, Dante was standing alone in the library, staring at the linen gloves Elena had folded on the table the night before. He picked them up. They were still faintly warm from the sun. He put them down again, and immediately felt ridiculous for having lifted them at all. Signora Costa appeared in the doorway. She did not say anything. She simply stood there with her arms folded, and looked at him the way a grandmother looks at a boy who has broken a vase, and is now claiming, "The wind did it." "You want to say something," Dante said. "No, sir, you do." Signora Costa allowed herself the smallest possible smile. "I would only say, sir, that in 22 years of service in this house, I've never once seen a girl handle a scolding with more dignity than she handled her firing." "And she was not scolded? She was accused." She paused, publicly. Dante did not answer. Signora Costa nodded once, as if she had expected exactly that response, and closed the door softly behind her. Somewhere on the second floor, a crate from Milan sat unopened in the corridor. Somewhere on the third, a Napoleonic land treaty lay on top of a 19th century recipe collection. The house had begun quietly to forget itself. Elena had a job by Tuesday. This surprised no one who actually knew her. The small antiquarian bookshop on Via della Rose had been trying to hire her for 3 years, and its owner, Signor Bruno, a widower in his 70s who read 4 languages and pretended he read only 2, wept quietly for exactly 11 seconds when she walked in on Monday afternoon and asked whether the position was still open. Then he recovered, shouted at his cat for no reason, and told her the hours were terrible, the pay was worse, and she could start whenever she wanted. She started the next morning. By Tuesday afternoon, she had reorganized his front window. By Thursday, she had located a first edition he had believed lost in 1987. By Friday, she had a small stool behind the counter because she was on her feet 9 hours a day, and her lower back had begun a quiet campaign of protest that she was determined to ignore. She did not tell Bruno about it. Bruno noticed on Saturday morning when he saw her press her palm against her spine, while she thought no one was watching. He said nothing. He bought a better stool. On Monday of the second week, a woman in a black coat came in and asked with a nervous glance at the door whether Elena had ever worked in a private archive. Elena said yes. The woman said her employer would very much like to speak with her about a position. Elena said her schedule was full. On Tuesday, a different woman came in with the same question. On Wednesday, a scholar from the university appeared and offered her a research post that would have doubled Bruno's salary and given her an office with a window. Elena thanked him warmly, poured him a coffee, discussed his monograph on Venetian mercantile records for 40 minutes, and declined. Bruno watched all of this from the back of the shop with mounting confusion. Tenay. "Elena," he said finally, "why did you say no?" "Because I promised you a year. I would release you from that promise in 3 seconds. I know, so why?" She looked up from the ledger. She was already correcting. "Because I said I would stay." Bruno stared at her. Then he made a small sound that was either a cough or a sob, and turned away to reshelve a book that did not need reshelving. That evening, Elena walked home along the narrow street with rain on the cobblestones, and she did not think about Dante Moretti even once. This was not because she had forgiven him. It was because she had never, in her entire life, wasted a single evening on a man who had already decided what she was worth without asking. She had known men like that. Her father had been one. She had learned before her 17th birthday that the only defense against a man who assigned your value was to hold your own so quietly and so completely that his opinion became weather, noticed, endured, unimportant. She unlocked her apartment. She ate soup. She read for an hour. She slept. Across the city, in a house full of 42,000 documents no one could read, a man who had never lost sleep over anything was awake at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling. Dante went to the bookshop on the 10th day. He did not go inside. He stood across the street under the awning of a closed cafe and watched her through the rain-streaked window while Raffaele stood 2 paces behind him and said absolutely nothing for the first 4 minutes. Then Raffaele said, "You've been staring for 3 minutes. That's called stalking." "It is not stalking. I am observing. That's what stalking is." Dante turned his head half an inch. Raffaele wisely looked at a pigeon. Inside the shop, Elena was laughing at something the old man behind her had said. She had a laugh that was surprisingly quiet, a small startled sound, like she had not expected to enjoy the joke and was now caught. Her hand had gone to her mouth. She was still holding a pen with the other hand. The whole tableau lasted perhaps 4 seconds. Dante watched it, as though he were memorizing evidence for a trial. "Why are we here?" Raffaele said.
D. Archive.
"The archive is at home."
I want her back, I know.
"Then we should go in and offer her the position." Dante did not move. Raffaele, whose patience was legendary among people who worked for people, it was not legendary among, allowed himself one very small sigh. "Sir, if you go in there and demand she return, she will refuse. If you apologize, she will accept the apology, but still refuse. If you stand out here for another 12 minutes staring through a window, someone is going to call the police, and I do not have the paperwork to explain why the head of the family is loitering outside a bookshop like a widower." Dante finally looked at him. "Then what do I do?" Raffaele considered the question with the gravity it deserved. "You do the one thing you have never done in your life," he said. "You wait." Dante did not like that answer. He returned to the estate. He did not sleep. He came back the next evening. He stood in the same spot. He did this on Wednesday and Friday and Sunday. On the second Monday, he sent someone in to buy a book. Any book, just so he could see what she said to a stranger who had no reason to be memorable. The someone was Raffaele, who protested, and then went in anyway. He purchased a small volume of Dante Alighieri, which he found personally embarrassing given the circumstances. He reported back that she had recommended it based on his facial expression, that she had wrapped it in brown paper without being asked, that she had called him Signor in a way that made him feel briefly like a better person, and that she had not at any point seemed to notice or care who he might be connected to. Dante listened to this report standing in the study with his hands behind his back. When Raffaele finished, Dante said, "She didn't ask about the house. No. She didn't ask about me. She didn't ask about anything. She recommended a book. That was the entire transaction." Dante nodded once. Then he stood at the window for a long time and did not speak. Raffaele quietly left the room. On the 21st day, Dante walked into the shop himself. He had told Raffaele he was going to make a formal apology and offer her the position back with a 3-fold salary increase. Raffaele had said this was an excellent plan. Raffaele had also privately wagered 11 euros with Signora Costa that Dante would say none of these things. The bell above the door rang softly. Elena looked up. Her expression did not change. This more than anything else was what Dante would remember later, that she had looked at the man who had publicly ruined her in front of the entire coastal aristocracy, and her face had done exactly what it would have done if the postman had walked in. "Signor Moretti, Signorina Vasari, how can I help you?" Dante had rehearsed 6 sentences. He said none of them. He said, "I need to buy a book. For a friend." What sort of friend? A difficult one. Behind a shelf, Signor Bruno silently mouthed the phrase, 11 euros. What does your difficult friend read? He does not read. Then why are you buying him a book? Because I would like him to start. Elena set down her pen. Oh. She looked at him for perhaps 4 full seconds, long enough for Dante to become aware that his collar was slightly too tight and that his hands, which had commanded rooms of armed men, did not currently know what to do with themselves. Then she said, "Poetry is too much for a beginner. Novels are too long. History intimidates them. Try letters, real ones, someone else's letters. From 100 years ago. Short, human. He will feel he is intruding, which will interest him." She turned, walked 3 steps to a shelf, pulled a small cloth-bound volume without hesitating, and placed it in his hands. Their fingers did not touch. She had made certain of that. 14 euros, she said. He paid. She wrapped the book. She tied the string. She handed it to him. He did not leave. Elena picked up her pen again. Was there something else, Signor Moretti? He opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. I was wrong, he said finally. Elena did not look up. About the letter, about the accusation, about all of it, I did not check. I did not ask. I fired you in front of 40 people because a woman I do not trust whispered something I wanted to be true. Silence spread strangely fast for such a small shop. Elena's pen stopped moving. Bruno, behind the shelf, held his breath. I would like to offer you your position back, Dante said, at 3 times the salary. No, thank you. I have not finished. You may finish. The answer will be the same. He did finish. She listened. Her answer was the same. When he left, he stood on the street for a long time holding a book. He did not want Raffaello open the car door. She refused. All of it. Especially the salary. Raffaello closed the door behind him. He did not collect the 11 euros. It seemed, under the circumstances, unkind. He came back the next day. He bought another book. He came back the day after that. He bought another. By the end of the week, Raffaele had informed the household that the head of the family was building what could only be described as a personal library of grief. By the 2nd week, Signor Bruno had begun to worry about inventory. By the 3rd, Elena had begun to lose patience, not with the visits which she found mildly ridiculous, but with the pretense. So one evening, when Dante entered at his usual hour and stood at the counter holding a book he had clearly picked up at random, she closed her receipt book, set down her pen, and said, Signor Moretti, you do not need any more books. I read them. You do not read that fast. I read some of them. You have purchased 41 books in 19 days. 42. I bought one this morning at the airport. Elena stared at him for a moment. Then, to Bruno's private astonishment, she began to laugh. The same small, startled laugh he had seen through the window that first rainy evening, the one she had immediately covered with her hand. She uncovered it this time. It was, briefly, the best sound in the shop. Dante, who had commanded warehouses and boardrooms, forgot for approximately 2 seconds what he had planned to say. If you are not going to accept the position, Elena said, and you are not going to stop coming, then you may as well be useful. The bottom shelves need to be reorganized. Signor Bruno cannot bend down without groaning. She held out an apron. It was faded canvas, patched at one pocket. It read, in embroidered thread that had once been white, The House of Books. Dante looked at it. He looked at her. He took the apron. He put it on. He knelt down beside the bottom shelf of the philosophy section in a charcoal gray blazer that cost more than most people's cars and began, without complaint, to alphabetize small cloth-bound editions of Kierkegaard. Bruno made an unidentifiable sound and sat down. Raffaele, who had been standing near the door pretending to browse, quietly turned his face toward the wall. 2 customers came in during the following hour. Both saw the most feared man on the northern coast, on his knees rearranging philosophy, and both walked back out without buying anything because they could not process what they were witnessing. Elena worked at the counter. She did not comment. She did not thank him. She simply let him do it. When he finished, 92 minutes later, his knees ached and his hands were dusty, and he had, at some point, without noticing, begun to hum. He stood up. He returned the apron. He said quietly, "Same time tomorrow." And Elena, who had not looked up from her ledger in 20 minutes, said, "If you like." He liked. He came the next day. He alphabetized theology. On the day after, poetry. By the end of the month, he knew where the acid-free sleeves were kept. Nobody at the estate spoke about it. Everybody at the estate knew. The problem, as Raffaele would later describe it to Signor Costa, was the professor. His name was Tommaso. He was 34, kind, wore beige sweaters, unironically, taught medieval paleography at the university, and had been coming into the bookshop for 11 years. He had liked Elena for approximately 9 of them. He had not said anything because he was the sort of man who believed that unwanted admiration was a small tax you did not force on the person you admired. But 6 weeks after Elena had returned to the shop, on an ordinary Thursday, Tommaso worked up the courage to ask her whether she might consider having dinner. Elena said yes. This was, in fairness, a reasonable response. She had known Tommaso for 9 years. He was gentle. He remembered her birthday. He had once carried a box of encyclopedias up 3 flights of stairs, without being asked. She did not know that Dante Moretti, who had spent the afternoon organizing children's literature, had overheard the invitation from the next aisle. She did not know that Dante had stood very still for approximately 8 seconds, and then, without a word, put down a copy of an illustrated bestiary and walked out of the shop. She did not know that Raffaele, following him to the car, had said, "Sir, do not do anything." She did not know that at 9:47 that evening Dante Moretti walked into the trattoria on Via Santo Stefano with no reservation, was seated immediately because he was Dante Moretti, and had to physically brace himself against the doorframe when he saw the 2 of them at a corner table. Elena was laughing. Not the small, startled laugh. A different laugh. A slower one. Tommaso was leaning forward. He was telling a story about a monk in the 14th century who had accidentally set fire to his own manuscript, and Elena, who loved manuscripts and disliked fire, was genuinely amused. Dante stood in the doorway for perhaps 11 seconds, then he turned and walked out. Raffaele, waiting at the curb, said nothing. Dante did not speak on the drive home. At 10:15 the following morning, an announcement went out from the estate that the university's paleography department would be receiving an unrestricted 3-year research grant from the Moretti Foundation. On the condition that its lead scholar, one Professor Tommaso Ricci, spend a minimum of 6 months per year at the Associated Institute in Bologna, beginning immediately. Raffaele read the announcement twice. He put it down. He walked into Dante's study. This is petty. It is a generous grant. It is a bribe. It is philanthropy. It is a bribe that removes a rival from the city. Dante looked up. His jaw was tight. His eyes were not. Raffaele. Send the grant. Raffaele sent the grant. Tommaso, to his enormous credit, saw the whole thing for exactly what it was inside of 12 hours. He went to the bookshop, told Elena the whole story, laughed about it because he genuinely thought it was funny, wished her well, and left for Bologna the following week. Elena stood behind the counter for a long time after he left. She was not laughing. She was thinking. Then she put on her coat. She locked the shop. She walked, in the rain, all the way across the old quarter to the gates of the Moretti estate. The guards at the gate recognized her before she reached the intercom. Nobody at the Moretti estate needed to be told who Elena Voss was any longer. Her firing had become over the intervening weeks the household's single most useful piece of shared context. The gate opened. She walked up the long drive in the rain. Signora Costa saw her from the kitchen window, put down the pot she was holding, and said aloud to a room containing 3 other women, "Get out!" All 3 women got out. Elena stepped into the foyer soaked through her coat dark with water, her hair coming down from its pins. A footman offered to take the coat. She said no. She stood in the middle of the marble floor and waited. Dante was already coming down the stairs. He had heard the gate. He was halfway down before he saw her. And when he did, he stopped so completely that his hand tightened on the banister. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Elena said quietly, "Send him back." "Who? You know who?" Dante did not pretend. He said, "No, send him back. Rescind the grant or increase it and let him take it here. Whatever you need to do, send him back." Elena took 1 step forward. She did not raise her voice. "Signor Moretti, twice now, you have made a decision about my life without asking me. The first time you did it in front of 40 people. This time you did it in front of a foundation. I am asking you, one time, to undo it. It was a grant, it benefits scholarship. It was a punishment. He knew it. I know it. Raffaele knows it. The only person pretending otherwise is you." Dante was silent. "I do not need you to protect me from a man who invited me to dinner," Elena said. "I do not need you to protect me from anything. I have gotten to 31 years old without the assistance of an army. I do not require one now." Elena, it was the first time he had said her name. She heard it. She did not move. "I did not send him away to protect you." "Then why?" "I do not know." He was standing now 1 step above her, close enough that she could see the small muscle in his jaw. His voice was very quiet. "I did not know I was going to do it until it was done. I heard him ask, and I stood in an aisle full of children's books, and something in me, something I do not have a word for, decided he could not have dinner with you, not because he was unworthy, because I was." A breath moved through the foyer. Signora Costa, who had been listening from behind a pillar, with no shame whatsoever, quietly crossed herself. "I have been coming to that shop," Dante said, "because I do not know how to be near you without inventing an excuse. I fired you because a woman I do not trust told me a lie I wanted to be true, and I wanted it to be true, because it gave me a reason to be angry at you, and I needed a reason, because you had been standing next to me for 2 years, being the only person in that house who spoke to me like a man instead of a Moretti. That is what I did. That is who I have been. I do not know how to make it right. I am telling you because you asked, and because I owe you the truth, and because—" He stopped. He could not finish. Elena stood very still. Rain dripped from her sleeve onto the marble floor. Somewhere in the kitchen, a pot fell over. She did not say yes. She did not say no. She said, "I would like a towel." Signora Costa, who had been waiting for exactly this cue with the readiness of a woman who had once served in a field hospital, produced a towel from behind a pillar within 4 seconds. Elena took it. She dried her hair. She dried her hands. She handed the towel back. Then she said, "The library is a disaster. I walked past the North Gallery on my way in. There is a Napoleonic land treaty on top of a 19th century recipe collection. There is an unopened crate from Milan in the corridor. There is, I could see this from the doorway, a first folio being used as a level under a wobbly table leg. That was not intentional." "I know. That is worse." Dante's mouth twitched. He did not quite smile. It was close. Elena walked past him. She walked toward the library. She reached the door. She turned. She looked at Dante over her shoulder. "I am not coming back as your archivist. I am coming as Signor Bruno's consultant, twice a week, For as long as it takes to fix what you have broken, you will pay Signor Bruno directly at a rate we will negotiate. You will not fire me again. If you have a complaint, you will ask me. If you have a suspicion, you will ask me. If someone whispers in your ear, you will ignore them. Are we clear? Yes, good. She turned to go into the library. She stopped again. Without looking at him, she added, "You may bring me tea. At 4. Every day I am here. You will not stand near me while I drink it. You will not comment on what I am doing. You will place the cup on the table and leave the room. Yes. And Signor Moretti, yes. The next time you tell me you owe me the truth, finish the sentence." She went into the library. Dante stood in the corridor for several seconds. Raffaele murmured, "That went better than expected. You are alive. You have not been slapped. She has agreed to come here twice a week. She is not coming back as my archivist. No. But she is coming." Dante looked at the closed library door. "She is coming," he said, more to himself than to Raffaele. Over the following weeks, Elena came on Tuesdays and Fridays. She wore the linen gloves. She reorganized the North Gallery. She trained 2 assistants who were terrified of her and consequently learned very quickly. At 4 o'clock, every day she was there, cup of tea appeared on the reading table. The person who placed it never lingered. Once on a Friday in the 2nd month, she looked up as he was leaving and said, "Thank you." He stopped in the doorway. He did not turn around. He said, "You are welcome." He kept walking. On a Friday in November, 4 months after the rain in the foyer, Elena sat at the reading table, finishing the last folio of the Florentine correspondence, the exact letters she had catalogued the night she was fired. She had not asked to be given them again. Dante had simply had them brought down from the 3rd shelf and left them in front of her on her 2nd Tuesday back, without comment, as if returning something that had been borrowed. She had said nothing. She had opened the first sleeve. She had continued the work. Now the last sleeve was closed. The index was finished. The letters were at long last home. She sat with her hand resting on the folio for a long moment. She did not know Dante had come into the room until he sat down across from her. He did not stand. He did not hover. He sat. This was new. She looked up. He looked back. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then he said, "I did not finish the sentence. I remember. May I finish it now?" "Yes." He took a breath. "I fired you," he said, "because on the night of the dinner, before the girl whispered in my ear, you had spoken to a waiter. He had dropped a tray. You had knelt on the floor with him and helped him pick up the glass. You had said something quietly to him that made him laugh. And I had watched from across the room and understood, without warning, that I was in love with you. And that terrified me, because I did not know how to be in love with someone who would kneel next to a stranger on my floor. So when a woman I did not trust gave me a reason to be angry at you, I took it, as fast as I could reach for it. Because being angry at you was easier than being what you deserved." Elena did not move. "I have not stopped being terrified. I still do not know how to be what you deserve. I have organized a bottom shelf. I have brought tea at 4. I have not fired anyone else in front of anyone in 4 months. That is the whole list. I am telling you the whole list because it is honest, and because it is very short, and because I would like you to know that I know it is short." He paused. "That is the sentence." Silence spread through the library, but it did not swallow the room. It settled. Elena looked at her hands. Then she looked at him. "That is a very bad sentence, Signor Moretti," she said. "I know. It has no structure. It runs on. It has 3 subordinate clauses that do not connect. I know. You should have had someone write it for you." "I did try." Raffaele refused. Her mouth moved. It was very nearly a smile. She did not quite let it become one. Instead, she picked up her cup. She drank her tea. She set the cup down. She said, "Dante." He had never heard her say it. Then he said, "Yes, come here." He came. He walked around the reading table. He did not know what he was walking toward. He stopped beside her chair. She stood. She reached up and placed one hand, one plain, ungloved, capable hand, flat against the front of his shirt, over the place where his heart was, and she left it there. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Months later, at an engagement dinner held in that same library, 43 guests would rise one by one when Signor Bruno lifted his glass and said, unsteadily, "To the archivist." Dante would lean down and whisper only to her. "The Florentine letters are in acid-free sleeves on the third shelf." And Elena, letting the smile become itself at last, would answer, "I know. I put them there."